This is probably going to be a constant state for us next year, starting next year for a while. It's just like bad news. I'm already tired of bad news, but, you know, it is what it is. Supreme Court seems ready to uphold ban on gender-affirming care for minors. I'm not surprised. U.S. Supreme Court heard arguments in a challenge to Tennessee's ban on gender-affirming care for transgender youth. The Supreme Court's, the conservative majority on Wednesday seemed very likely to uphold Tennessee's ban. In the last few years, fully half of the states have adopted similar bans, and Wednesday's case provided the first test of those laws. Three Tennessee families and the Biden administration are challenging the ban, which bar minors who say their gender doesn't align with the sex at birth from having access to puberty blockers and medications needed to transition to the opposite sex. Look, they make it sound so weird. It's just like, it's so crazy that they don't understand, like, just kids want to be happy, man. Just be happy. Just be happy. What makes you happy, dude? Do that. Solicitor General Elizabeth Prelogar led off on Wednesday, telling the justices that the state cannot eliminate medically approved treatments for gender dysphoria while allowing the same medical treatment for minors suffering from other conditions, the early onset puberty to endometriosis. Yeah, absolutely true. These are all gender-affirming cares. Even cis kids get it. Prelogar said that the state law singles out one particular use in its ban. Absolutely. It doesn't matter what parents decide is best for their children, she says. It doesn't matter what patients would choose for themselves, and it doesn't matter if doctors believe this treatment is essential for individual patients. She got an immediate pushback from the court's conservatives. Justice Clarence Thomas went first, questioning whether the law is, quote, simply a case of age classification when it comes to these treatments as opposed to a ban. Chief Justice John Roberts followed up by noting that this ban involves medical judgments and studies conducted outside the U.S., quote, doesn't make a stronger case for us to leave those determinations in the legislative bodies rather than try to determine for ourselves? I don't even understand what that argument's trying to make. Chief Justice John Roberts followed up by noting that this ban involves medical judgments, saying that it doesn't make a stronger case for us to leave those determinations in the legislative bodies rather than, this ban involves medical judgments. So defer to the medical professionals, idiot. The medical professionals are like, yeah, it's fine. Justice Samuel Alito reeled off a list of studies from Sweden, Finland, and the UK, studies that he said show the damaging effects of these treatments for minors. In light of that, he asked Prelogar if she would like to modify her claim that there's an overwhelming evidence of the benefits of gender-affirming treatment. No, replied Prelogar, noting that while there is a lot of debate about how to deliver this care, there is consensus that these treatments can be medically necessary for some minors. Yeah, absolutely. When we say these treatments can be medically necessary for some minors, transphobes immediately go, they're chopping off dicks! They're chopping the dicks off! It can't just be like, hey, you know, this kid who is like, I'm a girl. You're trying to make them go through, like, puberty that would make them feel more manly, and that's not good for their mental, you know? That's just, like, literally not good for their mental health. They don't wanna. No kid, even if they're cis, no kid should have to just fucking do this kind of stuff if they don't want to. It's not even really necessarily a gender thing. It's a freedom thing for me, always. Pressed by Justice Elena Kagan about whether all state laws would have to be struck down under her theory, Prelogar said no. We do think there is a real space for states to regulate here. And I point to the example of West Virginia. West Virginia was thinking about a total ban like this one, but then the Senate Majority Leader, who's a doctor, looked at the underlying studies, and the West Virginia legislature changed course and imposed a set of guardrails that are far more precisely tailored to concerns surrounding the delivery of this care. Justice Brett Kavanaugh raised concerns about minors who undergo these transition treatments, but later have regrets. Fucking detransitioners on Twitter. Kavanaugh, who used to supervise his daughter's basketball team, also asked Prelogar, if you prevail here, what would it mean for women's and girls' sports? Those questions are different, responded Prelogar, because they pit the rights of trans kids to participate in sports against the rights of cisgender kids concerned that they are being disadvantaged of the field. By the way, just be better than any trans kid. If you're worried about trans kids beating you in a sport, just like any other kid, just be better than them. Work harder. I promise you, if you work harder than a trans kid at sports, you will be better than them at that sport. That's how sports work. Both Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett asked about parental rights to determine their kids' medical treatment and noted that even if the trans kids lose this case, the parents can come back with a fresh challenge based on parental rights. Next up to the lectern and representing the trans kids was Chase Strangio, the first openly trans lawyer to argue before the court. He too faced questions about whether these are policy as opposed to legal questions. The Chief Justice focused on whether the Supreme Court even has the authority to address these types of questions. I'm good. Don't address the fucking. Leave it. Get away from it, Supreme Court. My understanding, said Roberts, is that the Constitution leaves that question to the people's representatives rather than to 9 people, none of whom is a doctor. I'm fine with that stance. I'm fine with it. I'm not a doctor. Who gives a shit? Yeah, great. Have that stance. Strangio countered that the role of the courts is to determine whether the law is narrowly tailored enough. Strangio said the Tennessee legislature had adopted a, quote, blunderbuss ban, overriding the careful judgment of parents who love and care for their children and the doctors who have recommended the treatment. Yeah, that's such a good argument. Because this is really what it's about, right? It's like, you guys aren't fucking doctors. You guys are not their parents. You guys aren't the kids. You're not involved in this decision whatsoever. Defending the ban, Tennessee Solicitor General Matthew Rice said the law allows the use of drugs and surgeries for some medical purposes, but not for others. Thus, he maintained, the law is based on purpose, not sex. The law is based on purpose, not sex. I'm sure. But Justice Kagan wasn't buying that argument at all. The prohibited purpose here is treating gender dysphoria. The whole thing is imbued with sex. It's a dodge to say it's not based on sex. The prohibited purpose here is treating gender dysphoria. So you don't want to treat gender dysphoria? Is that what you're saying? Like the argument is that we ought not treat it? The court's other 2 liberals followed up. Sonia Sotomayor asked whether, given Tennessee's logic, the state could block gender-affirming treatment for adults too. Rice responded in the affirmative, saying that democracy is best check on potentially misguided laws. Justice Sotomayor shot back with, when you're 1% of the population or less, it's very hard to see how the democratic process is going to protect you. It's very hard to see how the democratic process is going to protect you when you're less than 1% of the population. Yes, absolutely. So we have to do the job. Throughout arguments, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, I want to say Jackson Brown so bad, I don't know why. My brain was flipping those. Ketanji Brown Jackson raised concerns about the bigger consequences of the court upholding Tennessee's law, saying, quote, I'm worried that we're undermining the foundations of some of our bedrock equal protection cases. Justice Neil Gorsuch, usually quick with questions, had none on Wednesday. He is the author of the court's only decision on trans rights, upholding those rights in the context of employment. Look, if you're trans, get what you need now. If they come for your bullshit, like your rights, we'll fight them. You have states that will ally with you and that will not extradite you for seeking medical care that you deserve. And you have people in the community that will support you if you need it, whether it's this community or others. This is such a fucking stupid issue. A lot of the trans stuff is like not born out of concern whatsoever. Anyone that's concerned about trans people, like genuinely concerned about their well-being, comes out with, oh, well, treating gender dysphoria the way that they would like to see it treated is usually the course of action, like them and their doctors or whatever. It's not hard to understand why trans people are like seeking the type of treatment they're seeking when they describe to you their issues. You're like, oh, okay, well, just be how you want to be. I don't care. And that should be all it is. It's a freedom of expression issue. And it ought to be argued on such grounds. Because then it implies that, like, you know, people can't wear what they want anyway or whatever. Like, it has much broader impacts than just, like, impacting trans people. Because while they're being picked on, we're just like getting lost in the fucking sauce instead of focusing on other fights that are more important systemically. But we can't just let trans people get thrown under the bus. We can walk and chew bubblegum at the same time. We do it all at the same time. But it's like such a fucking like so cynical, scapegoating trans people to like smoke screen like the real problem with, you know, any sort of like pedophilia or sexual immorality or whatever you want to call it is not trans people and gay people, and it never has been. Even if just like any other group, there are trans and gay predators. It's totally a thing. But in a much higher clip, there are predators in white male Christian right-wing spaces. But we can't talk about that because they're in charge. And it's like, no, fuck this. So they're going to point their finger at you instead of pointing their finger at themselves. Because, of course, because you have less systemic power than them, and they get to bully you. The rest of us can't let that happen. So if we are doing this, we're also going to ban circumcision on babies, right? Fuck. Yeah, right. That's religious freedom. We should just start a religion where you can be trans, and then that's it. Okay, religious freedom, boom. They respect that shit way more than just, like, general human freedoms. Don't know why. Pretty stupid. Trans rights are humans' rights. It's not really complicated. I'm kind of tired of having to have this conversation with people. I love you, chat. I love the trans members of chat, but I gotta be honest. I don't give a shit what your gender is. I don't care. That's how woke I am. I don't even fucking think about it when you're around. Just be who you are. Someday this will be in the past, and you will have your liberation. And we already like really have a society where you can be out, but they're trying to stuff that back in the box, and we're not gonna fucking let it happen.